On that August day in 1846, in a quiet Scottish village, it was not only the walls of a poor farmhouse that shook, but the very foundations of the known world. In the gloom of a room, thick with the scent of herbs and superstitious dread, something was happening that defied both nature and human understanding. The old midwife recoiled from the birthing bed, muttering frantic prayers, for the child she held was not merely an infant, but a living refutation of all known laws. This was a titan for whom the human world was too small even before he drew his first breath. A gigantic baby weighing nearly 18 pounds and measuring 28 inches long. The world did not yet know it, but this was an omen, a harbinger of an astonishing and tragic destiny that would unfold before the eyes of a stunned public on 2 continents. Thus began the legend of Anna Haining Swan, the Amazon of Nova Scotia. You think you know her story? The tale of a circus oddity, of the tallest woman in the world, whose name was printed on the posters of cheap sideshows and in the columns of scandalous newspapers. But that is merely the cover, a crude caricature painted for a spectacle-hungry crowd. We will venture behind the curtain of this fairground sensation to separate fact from myth, to see not an exhibit, but a living human being. Prepare to learn about a woman of sharp intellect and a tender soul, about her great love, her crushing losses, and the incredible strength of spirit that allowed her to stand unbroken beneath the weight of both her body and a cruel world. This story will prove to be far more poignant and shocking than any newspaper fantasy. Fate, dressed in the frock coat of a seasoned impresario, did not keep her waiting. Very soon, young Anna understood that her extraordinary height was not a gift, but a curse and a ticket to a world where human dignity was measured in box office receipts. The glare of the gaslights on stage and the loud posters proclaiming her the 8th wonder of the world gave way to a humiliating reality in the stale air of a dressing room. There, far from the adoring and curious eyes, she would hear the coarse voice of her latest master scolding her for not looking impressive enough, as if she were not a person, but a poorly made prop. He wanted a monster, a giantess, whose very gaze would make the audience weak at the knees. What he saw was a frightened girl, huddled in a corner, wishing she could become invisible. Her body, her very uniqueness, became a commodity, a living exhibit, to be weighed, measured, and appraised with the cold, shameless eye of a butcher at the market. And so Anna, clenching her teeth, would walk out onto the stage again and again to the whistles and jeers of the crowd. She learned to smile when her heart was breaking and to bow majestically when she wanted to sink through the floor. The people did not see a person in her. They wanted to see the confirmation of their own wild fantasies and rumors. Behind her back, whispers swelled into a chorus of vulgar speculation that she could devour an entire ox in one sitting, that she slept in a haystack because no bed in the world could hold her. Every such rumor was another small nail driven into her already wounded soul. The ordinary world became an obstacle course for her, a mockery of her very nature. Chairs creaked and groaned beneath her, ceilings pressed down, and doorways forced her into a humiliating stoop. Everything around her, from a teacup to a carriage, was made for other normal people, constantly reminding her of her otherness. But that was not the worst of it. The worst was the internal chilling feeling of absolute loneliness. As she fell asleep at night, she would ask herself the same question: Would no one ever see beyond this mountain of flesh to the ordinary woman who, like everyone else, dreamed of simple human warmth, understanding, and love? She feared she was doomed to remain a curiosity forever, a solitary exhibit in a cabinet of human destinies. Then one day, in the endless whirlwind of touring, when hope had all but vanished, something happened that would forever divide her life into before and after. A new performer arrived to join their circus troupe, his appearance announced with great fanfare. His name was Martin Van Buren Bates, and he went by the grand moniker of the Kentucky Giant. For the impresario, he was a gold mine, a chance to create an unprecedented duet of giants. But for Anna, it was a moment filled with anxiety and a vague sense of anticipation. She was used to being one of a kind, a lone peak on a flat plain, and the thought of meeting someone similar stirred a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Would he be just like the others, a person who used his uniqueness to make a living, but who secretly despised both himself and her? He approached her after another exhausting performance as she sat, depleted and weary, in the shadow of a tent. But his gaze held none of the mockery or businesslike appraisal she had grown so accustomed to seeing. Instead, his eyes were filled with a deep sympathy and a quiet, almost brotherly understanding. He didn't speak of height or contracts or the audience's reaction. He simply asked her softly if it was hard. That simple phrase, devoid of all pretense, shattered the armor Anna had been building for years. For the first time in her life, someone was speaking not to the curiosity, but to her soul. And she, surprising even herself, answered honestly, while the tears that welled in her eyes said more than words ever could. He offered her his enormous strong hand, and in that simple gesture there was more warmth and support than she had ever known. From that day on, their lives were intertwined. They were not merely colleagues in misfortune, forced to share a stage. They became each other's life raft in an ocean of loneliness. Martin turned out to be a man of surprising erudition and a gentle soul. He opened up a world to Anna that she had only dimly suspected existed. He read Shakespeare aloud to her, and she was astonished at how the great tragedies and comedies came to life in his voice. He told her of ancient civilizations, of philosophy and art, and she absorbed the knowledge she had been deprived of in her youth like a sponge. Thanks to him, she began to realize that her mind was as extraordinary as her body, and that she was capable of so much more than simply standing on display for the amusement of a crowd. Their love blossomed from this deep intellectual and spiritual kinship. For the first time, Anna felt like a subject, not an object, a woman valued for her thoughts, her feelings, and her talents. They married, and the event, of course, caused a sensation. The newspapers were breathless with excitement, describing the wedding of giants and the world's tallest couple, turning their private happiness into yet another public spectacle. But by then, Anna and Martin no longer cared about the outside noise. They had found their own world in each other, their own quiet harbor. Looking into her beloved husband's eyes, Anna knew she was no longer alone. They were happy, in spite of everything, and that was their greatest victory over a cruel and mocking world. Leaving behind the glitter and squalor of the fairground life, Anna and Martin finally found what they had secretly dreamed of, a secluded world of their own. They bought a spacious farmhouse in Ohio, which they remodeled to fit their needs, creating a space where they no longer had to stoop or feel like outsiders. For the first time in her life, Anna felt she was the mistress not only of her home, but of her destiny. Their days filled with quiet joys. Martin took up farming with enthusiasm, while Anna managed the household, read the books her husband had introduced her to, and welcomed a few loyal friends. They were not merely giants in retirement. They were an ordinary family building a simple, human happiness far from prying eyes. And in this idyllic life, only one thing was missing: the sound of a child's laughter. Then, the miracle they had so longed for came to pass. Anna became pregnant. The news filled their home with light and boundless joy. All fears and doubts receded in the face of this new hope. They prepared with reverence for the arrival of their firstborn, imagining how they would raise him in love and peace, in a world where no one would ever call him a curiosity. But fate, as if jealous of their happiness, was preparing for them the cruelest of all possible trials. The labor was agonizingly difficult and long, requiring the intervention of several doctors. When the child was finally born, everyone froze in shock. It was a boy who broke all records, 20 pounds in weight and 30 inches in length. But his gigantic body proved too fragile for this world. He lived for only a few hours before quietly passing, never having a chance to know the world that awaited him. For Anna, this was not just a blow. It was the collapse of her entire universe. Grief, sharp and merciless, consumed her. In her mind, the tragedy was a direct consequence of her own nature, her curse. She blamed herself, her height, her body, which, it seemed to her, could not give life, only create suffering. Martin was by her side, trying to comfort her, to find words of support. But her despair was a wall that no words could penetrate. She withdrew into herself, fading before his eyes in the grip of depression. Then one night, at the very bottom of this darkness, she dreamed of her son. He was smiling and seemed to be asking her not to cry, promising to always be with her. That dream, born of her loving heart, became her lifeline, a slender thread of hope she could cling to in order to go on living. In time, having recovered from the first blow, they decided to try again. The new pregnancy was fraught with anxiety, but hope was still stronger than fear. Alas, fate struck a second, even more devastating blow. The scenario repeated itself with terrifying precision: an incredibly difficult birth and the arrival of another giant son, weighing almost 24 pounds. He, too, was too large for this world and departed just a few hours later. But this time, Anna's reaction was different. Having endured a double loss, it was as if she had walked through a fire that did not break her, but tempered her soul. She withstood the blow. In the deafening silence of her grief, she came to understand that her life and her purpose were not limited to motherhood. A new path lay ahead of her. Surviving a tragedy that would have broken anyone else, Anna did not allow grief to consume her. She accomplished something incredible. She transformed her crushing pain into a force for good. Realizing she was not destined to be a mother to her own children, she decided to become a pillar of support for those who needed help and compassion. Her unrealized maternal love found an outlet in active charity work. She no longer hid from the world in her secluded home. On the contrary, she went out to the people, but in a new capacity. not as a curiosity, but as a person with a giant heart. Her home became a refuge for the needy, and her name became synonymous with kindness in the local community. She threw herself into public life, finding in it new meaning and healing. Anna organized fundraisers for orphanages and helped poor farming families who, like her own parents once had, were struggling to survive. Possessing a remarkable gift for empathy, she intuitively sensed the pain of others and always knew how to help, with a word, a deed, or simply with her quiet, understanding presence. It was rumored she even took part in protests against animal cruelty, an act both brave and unconventional for a woman of her time and station. In this work, she finally found what she had been denied her entire life: respect for herself as a person, not as a physical phenomenon. Martin watched this transformation with admiration and pride. He saw his beloved wife, who had endured unimaginable suffering, not just survive, but flourish, becoming stronger, wiser, and more confident. He supported her in all her endeavors, serving as her faithful partner and pillar of strength. In his eyes, she was not just his wife, but a true heroine, whose inner strength was truly gigantic, far surpassing her physical size. Their love, forged in the fire of shared trials, ascended to a new, deeper level of understanding and spiritual intimacy. They were not just the tallest couple in the world, they were a union of two incredibly powerful souls. But her trials had taken their toll on her body. The constant stress, the physical strain of her great height, and perhaps the consequences of her difficult childbirths undermined her health. A cunning illness, tuberculosis, slowly but surely sapped her strength. Anna passed away quietly and peacefully at the age of just 41. Her departure was a great loss not only for Martin, but for all those she had helped. She left behind not the memory of a circus giantess, but the shining legend of a woman with a boundless heart, who proved that true greatness is measured not in inches, but in the capacity to love and to feel compassion. Martin outlived his beloved wife by 31 years, but his heart remained with her forever. He never remarried, dedicating the rest of his days to preserving Anna's memory. Their home in Ohio, once their fortress and sanctuary, became a memorial to their great love. Every object, every book, every piece of custom-made furniture reminded him of her. He would often wander through the woods where they had loved to walk together, and in the rustling of the leaves, he seemed to hear her gentle voice. To the world she was a legend, but to him she remained alive, his Anna, his one and only love. When his time came, he left only one instruction in his will: to be buried beside her and their infant sons. Their final resting place became a shared grave under the shade of an old oak tree they had once planted together as a symbol of their eternal bond. On the simple headstone is an inscription that tells their story better than any epitaph. Here lie Anna and Martin Bates. Their love was as great as their height. This phrase became the testament to their destiny, transforming a physical anomaly into a metaphor for boundless spiritual intimacy. Their story, which began as a fairground attraction, concluded as a beautiful and tragic ballad of love. And though some might say that Anna Swan's life was a series of misfortunes and sufferings, was it truly an unhappy life? Yes, She knew the bitterness of humiliation, the pain of loneliness, and the most terrible loss a woman can endure. But she also found a great love that many can only dream of. She experienced the joy of intellectual and spiritual growth. And most importantly, she managed to turn her curse into a gift and her personal tragedy into a source of strength to help others. She left an indelible mark on history, not as a circus phenomenon, but as a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. For you must agree, this story compels us to reflect on matters far more important than physical size or outward appearances. It reminds us how often we judge people by their cover, without trying to look inside and see the entire universe within. Anna's story is a hymn to acceptance, compassion, and a love that can overcome any obstacle. It is proof that a person's true greatness is measured not by how tall they stand over others, but by the depth of their heart and their ability to find happiness and meaning in even the cruelest and most unjust of circumstances.